the box today?
What? And Stephanie? No, and Stephanie's not in the box.
So, it's a little trick today. Uh-oh. There's nothing in the box today. That's because today it's a question box service. So, what's in the box is your questions. So, in Unitarian Universalist Church, a lot of us do a question box service every year or so, and people get to ask any questions they have. So I wanted to know, do you have any questions about anything at all? Yes, Zane. How does a plane work? Wow. You know what? I don't know that much about how a plane works. Are there any engineers here? Yeah? Who's the best person to answer how a plane works? Yeah? Okay. How does a plane work?
The shape of the wing creates a pressure difference that causes lift.
Okay. Does that make sense to you, Zane? Thank you. That's a good question. I like that. And I'll bet your mom can help you more because she's good at that kind of thing. She understands about engineering a little bit and robotics. Any other questions? You guys have any questions about anything? Not today? Yeah? What's your question? I didn't quite catch that. Not sure? How did they make the rug? Yeah.
Oh, how does a tractor work?
How does a tractor work? Oh boy, we're on engineering today. This is the path we're taking. This is potentially the worst line of questioning for me possible. Well, I know it has an engine, and the engine makes it go. There's like a fire inside it, and the energy from the fire makes it go forward. Pretty cool, huh? Well, all right, I loved your questions, guys. Any more before you go back? No? So you're going to go back. Oh, yes, Zane.
How does a ship work?
The ship, yeah. It depends on the ship. A battleship? That sounds like something that maybe when you go back, your mom could help you. A little Google could help. Yeah. But I love that you're wondering how things work. That's a really good question. Just looking around and wondering how it all works. I think grown-ups kind of stop thinking about that. We just kind of take for granted, all the things work. And we even think we kind of understand how they work, but once you spend some time with a kid and they ask you, you realize you don't know how anything works. We need so many people to make society function, to all their areas of expertise. We really know very little, so kids are really good at reminding us of that. So we're going to sing you out, and then you can go back, and if you have any more questions, then you guys, that's great. You do? But you're not going to tell me? One question that you're not going to tell me. Maybe you can tell me another day then. It's really great to be curious. That's part of what being a Unitarian Universalist is. We're really curious. So I love that about you guys. We're going to sing you out, and you can go ask some more questions in religious education. So we're going to sing the children out with As You Go. You can find the words in your order of service.
We hold you in our love as you go, as you go. May your heart be at peace as you go, to nurture the spark of your precious life. We hold you in our love as you go.
Okay. So we've come to the questions and answers of the question box service. And John and I will both offer some of our answers. We have some questions that people asked already. If we have time, we'll ask for more. But some of these were really good questions. So I could go on. I could write a whole sermon about some of these questions, maybe all of them. So I got to ask you guys for your questions more often. Give me sermon ideas. Well, so the first question that we got came from Nancy, and it's, why is Unitarian Universalism so hard to explain? Would you?
Right. Yeah, so let me tell you about my mom. So my mom is a very supportive person. You know, so one quick story. My dad wanted to name me John Wesley Monroe after the famed the Methodist, the founder of the Methodist Church. My mom said no, because what if he doesn't want to be a Methodist? But actually, when it came to it, she kind of struggled with the fact that I didn't want to be a Methodist. But very supportive. She supported me on my path to the ministry. But she does not understand Unitarian Universalism. You know, she'll ask me to send her my sermons, and she'll say, "Why don't you talk about God?" You know, and I try to explain. It's hard. And this is why I think it's hard. Because in a lot of faith traditions, what holds a church together or a tradition together is a specific set of beliefs, of tenets. In Unitarian Universalism, we are held together by the values we share in common. And we see that there are many ways to express those values. I'm actually studying the Bhagavad Gita right now, and I can see resonance there with the Unitarian Universalist tradition. And I just recently studied the Tao Te Ching, and I'm studying this other Buddhist text, and I can see all this resonance. But to me, it's not about specific claims. It's about what are the values that shape our lives. And that's something that people just have a hard time understanding. They want to know, what do you believe? And it's like, oh, we believe that it is important to make everyone feel loved and included and welcomed. And they don't always understand that.
So I wrote 2 pages, really. And then, I'm not going to read them to you, but I had so many thoughts on this. My first thought was something similar to what John was saying. It was, so if you look at what the dominant religious tradition in our country is, in American culture, it's Christianity, and it's a fairly fundamental version of Christianity. You know, the Puritans were the ones who came here, and so that's kind of the lens through which people tend to view religion, and that brand of Christianity, the more fundamental you are, the more the thing that defines your religion is the ideas you believe. So a creed, The ideas you believe are what define your religion. And even if that's not our framework, it's our culture, it's the larger cultural framework. And many religions, that's not how they define whether you're part of that religion. But the non-dominant religions are all kind of forced to explain themselves in the way that the dominant religion understands things. So the dominant religion says, what ideas do you believe? And then you kind of try to express it, but that's not the center of our faith. So our faith is covenantal. So the important thing about our faith is how we relate to each other. You can believe a lot of different ideas about religion, but the important thing is, how are you helping other people in this community on their spiritual path? Are you helping them develop love? And it's not, are you helping them accept a specific idea? It's not about a belief, it's about the container we build for everyone's beliefs. So you can be in a Unitarian Universalist church, and you could be a Christian, and I can be Buddhist, and I will support you in every possible way to live more fully into your Christian faith. I could be Muslim, and you could be an atheist, and I'm not going to try to convert you. I'm going to show up for you. If you're in hospice, I'll show up and I'll talk about what's meaningful to you. And maybe look at pictures of your grandkids, not talk about my faith, but talk about what's your sense of meaning. So that's sort of part of my answer. That's one piece of it. And then the other thing that came to me was I did have an elevator speech. So my elevator speech is, love is at the center of our faith. So if you're working to live every aspect of your life with love, you're following our faith. If you're being controlled by hate or a quest for power or some other thing, you're not. So that's not actually very complicated or hard to explain. It's not some idea. Lots of people have lots of ideas about the sacred nature of life, but they treat people really poorly. So I think there's a real simplicity to being accountable to love and loving action and not ideas. So that's my answer. The next question was, what is the best way to deal with anger and its consequences?
Anger. All right. Let's talk about the physiology of anger. All right. So anger is rooted in the body, right? We all know this. When you get angry, you get that, adrenaline, etc. And there's good reason for that, of course, because what is the point of anger? What is the point of that physical response? To help us act. Okay? Here's the funny thing, though, about anger, that physiological response. Scientists have found that it lasts somewhere around, I think it's like 7 to 12 seconds. So you have that burst, it lasts for about 7 to 12 seconds, something like that, and then it subsides. When does it not subside? When we feed it with our stories, when we feed it with our outrage. So here's an example. So at work, I have found that, I juggle a lot of projects, and sometimes when I have so much to do, I get hyper-vigilant, right? Where I want to make sure everything is happening right on time. And then if anything kind of disrupts me, I feel that trigger. I feel that anger. Now, when that happens for good reason, because that's me saying, oh, I got to make sure things stay on track. That's good. That's a positive, right? But what can happen is, if I begin to get outraged, just like, oh, why did this person do this, or why did this have to happen? I can sit there and just sort of feed the anger. And what I've been learning to do is to stop feeding it. So I feel the anger, there's no way around it, right? But then I stop telling stories about it. I stop saying why it's good I'm angry, why I'm justified. and I let it go. And the Dalai Lama said, someone asked him, do you ever get angry? And he said, of course I get angry, but I don't hang on to my anger. And I think that's what he was talking about. And one thing that I've actually learned is, I think I've mentioned before in a sermon, I have a mantra. It comes from the prayer of St. Francis, which wasn't actually by St. Francis, but never mind. But, Lord, make me an instrument of thy peace, right? I actually use that as a mantra. And so one thing I've actually learned to do is when I feel that anger, Lord, make me an instrument of that peace. And I stop feeding it. Dealing with the consequences, now this is where the good old Christian tradition comes in. It's like confess, repent. Because, sometimes I will be snippy with someone. And I've realized the best thing to do is, sorry I was snippy. And I'll say that at work, which is very uncomfortable. And I will say it to Karen if I'm snippy at home. It's like, sorry, sorry. And that sort of lets things go. So that's my.
Yeah, so there's not just one answer to this, like any of these questions, but I thought it was a little bit more complicated because depending on who you're answering, their relationship to anger can be different. I come from a perspective that anger is harmful because it sort of destroys our peace of mind and makes us unhappy and causes us to do things that might be harmful. At the same time, depending on what someone is actually trying to express with this question, there's, it might be they have a sense of wanting justice. And so I'm not saying don't feel that feeling of wanting justice. Don't feel that awareness that something is wrong. But I think you can also look at it and say, well, this is not so great for you to feel. It just sort of disrupts your ability to be effective in the world. So from that perspective, I always find that anger is a secondary emotion. It's not the first thing. There's something more intolerable underneath it that you don't want to deal with. So I think the best way to deal with anger is to look at what's underneath it. Is it despair or fear or vulnerability that you don't want to feel? And then get better at letting yourself feel all of the things you're blocking with your anger. So it's not that you suppress the anger, but allow the other things too. And that might help it dissipate. You can also just look at the feeling itself. And if you really look at it, try to find what color it is and what shape it is and where exactly it is, and you'll find that it gets harder and harder to locate. It's not as solid and unchanging and real as we might imagine. So you can work with it a little bit more if you see it that way. The next question is, what made you decide to be a minister?
The pay. Yeah. It's interesting. I think when I decided to be a minister, my answer would have been different, even though what I'm going to say now is actually true. For me, my father was a minister. He was a very philosophical person, and so this really shaped me. But for me, even from a young age, I was always curious about how do we live a good life? How do we live a good life? And I wasn't satisfied with pat answers, which is why I left the Methodist Church. Because I didn't think that beliefs had anything to do with living, helping us live a good life. And that was probably not a very skilled way of thinking, but that was what I experienced. But I've always been curious, how do we live a good life? And my first time on campus at Wesley Theological Seminary, when I went to like an open house, I realized this is what people were doing every day, all day, was sitting there talking about how do we live a good life? How do we live a life with meaning? And I realized that's what I wanted to do. And not for myself, but to work with people in a community to figure out how do we live a good life. And that's what put me on the path.
So I wanted to help people. That was my guiding force. I wanted to do something that would help people. And I majored in religion in college just because it was interesting to me, but I never imagined it would have anything to do with my career. It was just sort of this thing that was to the side and interesting to me. I thought that maybe I could help people by being a public interest lawyer. That was my plan, and I actually had a job as a legal assistant in a public interest nonprofit that was working for LGBTQ civil rights and rights for people with HIV and AIDS. And so I got a firsthand view of what lawyers do, and that changed my mind about being a lawyer. It felt very boxed in. It felt, you have to work within the law, and there's a lot of writing and not a lot of connection to people. And so when I got to see up close how that worked, I was questioning whether being a lawyer was really what I was looking for. And it happened that we worked with sometimes ministers, and they were also trying to help people and trying to work for justice. And I saw that they got to really connect to people, and they had more freedom to do whatever seemed like it would be helpful. And they worked with religion, which was this thing that I just never thought would be part of work. And it kind of came together that there was this job that was all the things I wanted to be doing in one. So it started me on my journey. What are some concrete ways members of the congregation can help you do your job? I swear I didn't plant that one.
So I'll let Reverend Ashley talk about the concrete ways, but let me provide kind of a philosophical framing, if you will. So I remember when I was young, sitting in church, the Free Methodist Church in Salem, and I was a professional critic, not paid, but a professional. I sat there and I evaluated everything about the service, including, true story, I timed the sermon. And I reported to the minister how long he preached. It's true. That was very silly, but I think there is this kind of broader tendency that we all have. It's easy to fall into seeing worship as a performance and to see the congregation as an audience, the minister as a performer. And, and when I say that, I mean me. I was doing that too when Karen and I started attending the UU church. And I realized, well, if I want to do that, I can just go to a movie, right? I can go to a movie and critique the movie, thumbs up, thumbs down. I only began to get something out of church when I allowed myself to be vulnerable, one. I opened myself to change. And when I saw every worship service, every event as a gift that in some way or another will benefit me, some things more than others, and that's okay. But it's when I made that transition to seeing that in this case, worship service is something that I am part of, not observing that cool stuff happens.
One answer is probably pretty intuitive, and the other one is less intuitive, I think. I'll start with the intuitive. We ask for what we need volunteers for. And if you are volunteering, try to check in with yourself about whether you're getting to the end of this particular volunteer task before it's total burnout, and maybe shift to somewhere else. Talk about shifting to somewhere else, bringing someone else in to take your place. That seems fairly intuitive, but and then the other thing, which is probably less intuitive, is don't try to avoid bothering me. Especially with pastoral needs, I think people are like, oh, it's not that important. I don't want to make a thing of it. And in doing that, it means that I won't know that you could benefit from help. And that is not just a problem for you, but for our whole community, that we have someone who's suffering in silence. So I would say, I encourage you to reach out and let me know if you're struggling. It doesn't have to be something huge, you know. If you lost a pet, then that's very painful. If you're going into the hospital for surgery, but it's not a major surgery, it's still scary. So I just encourage you to reach out. And the last question that was sent in was, how do you navigate through grief?
So I actually preached a whole sermon on this not that long ago, but there's actually one kind of way of thinking about this that I did not talk about, but I thought was very fascinating. So it's about shifting your mindset from in spite of to because of. So let's say you're dealing with grief. You can say, well, I had a good time this weekend in spite of the fact that it was the anniversary of my mother's death. Or you can say, I know my mother would have wanted me to have a good time. Because of her, I know to save her life. To save her life. It's like yes and. Do you guys know yes and from the world of comedy? So in the world of improv comedy, someone will do something, you know, they'll be doing their little bit, and then it's time to pass it to someone else, and so they'll in some way throw a challenge at the other person. And the proper response is yes and so what you're doing is you're acknowledging what the other person said and you're taking it in a new direction. And we can do that with grief. So for example, this last week was the first birthday of my friend Paul, who died last summer. And it just so happened that this musician that we both like, Chris Smither, who he actually introduced me to, put out a new album. And when I was listening to that album, I was thinking, dang, I wish Paul were here so we could talk about it. Yes, I do. And I'm so happy that we shared this music and that when I listen to Chris Smither, I can think of Paul. It's not that I enjoy the music of Chris Smither in spite of Paul's death. I enjoy Chris Smither because of him. And so grief is always there, but there can be so much more. So yes and.
There's not one answer. To go back to the anger question, there's not one answer. I think it depends on each individual, what gives them a sense of meaning, and therefore how they navigate through grief. The advice that I have is probably a couple of things. Talk about the person, tell their story. tell the stories that remind you of them and connect you to them. Develop rituals of your own. There are religious rituals and sort of cultural rituals. We do a memorial service, we do a burial, that sort of thing, and those are good. But there are also personal rituals we can develop that are not sort of standardized, and I think those are key to working through our own grief. So, I'm a gardener, and one of the things that I have done in thinking about the people who I've served who have died in a given year is, I plant some bulbs. I know they're going to come up again and again, and I think about the name of the person as I'm planting the bulb. It's just my own ritual, and it's a way to keep it with me, keep the person with me, and also move forward. So those personal rituals really help us, I think. And then another thing is try to embody their good qualities. Because what you miss about them is what you miss about them, those great things. So how can you be like that? How can you continue them? By living out whatever the best things about them were. And I think put those together, that's all very helpful to your process. So that's the end of the questions that were sent in. Does anyone have a wonderful final question for us?
Do you like preaching together?
I love it, yeah.
But what's so cool, I mean, you could see it right just in what we did, where we each will come at a question from a different direction. And, it's like in the Jewish tradition of the Midrash, you just add meaning in different ways. And it's just so cool. How do we find meaning in life? We find it by working together. And that's cool.
Yes, and.
Yes, and.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's very you. Yes. I always tell John, and I'll tell you, I appreciate so much everything he brings to this congregation as an affiliated minister. He's a wonderful gift to all of us. I love working with him. All right, so I'll close this out then with a little reading by Rilke. Be patient toward all that is unsolved in your heart, and try to love the questions themselves, like locked rooms and like books that are now written in a very foreign tongue. Do not now seek the answers which cannot be given you because you would not be able to live them. And the point is to live everything. Live the questions now. Perhaps you will then gradually, without noticing it, live along some distant day into the answer.